the International Soccer Preview. We are Soccer Files Canada. Welcome to our continuation of Series 19. This one looking at the players of the 2023 Asian Cup, due to be played in January 2024. This episode is looking at the players of Lebanon. Here we go. Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Preview by Soccer Files Canada. I'm Kevin and this is Series 19 on the players of the 2023 Asian Cup, played in 2024. This episode covers Lebanon's players. And we're doing this mediacast in two parts. Part one is a look at the candidates for the squad and their likelihood of making it. We think we went into too much detail in previous player mediacasts we've done, so we're aiming for a lighter, more listener-friendly version this time. Part two will come out when the squad lists are released and the final squad is selected. We think that will be in late December. And then we'll go back over the list that we create here and see who made it and who didn't. And we'll also cover a couple of other things which we'll talk about more at the end here. We have made a separate video on what we will be covering over the next 9 months. YouTube watchers can see that link on the screen, and it can also be found in the show notes for both watchers and listeners. In short, though, we're focused on the Asian and African Cups, both of those taking place in early 2024. And we have also started coverage on World Cup 2026 qualifying. Okay, so today's episode will have three sections. Section one, where we give some general information on the team and discuss that. Section two is the main part where we look at the candidates in each position, or the main candidates. And section three, where we give any closing thoughts, and that's where we'll give a preview of part two in more detail. Okay, let's begin then with section one. And we're going to start with some comments on the squad. So Lebanon had played a lot of games in 2023, 13 of them up until our recording here, which is in late October. Those games were played under manager Alexander Ilic. However, the Football Association was not satisfied with the results. We'll take a quick look at those shortly. And they fired him in early October of this year, so just a short time ago. His replacement was Nikola Jurcevic, who now has very little time to sort out his team. He had the October games, although those took place just within a couple of weeks of his signing. He also has 2 games in November, and whatever warm-up friendlies they schedule before the tournament, none are scheduled so far. So as we go through the candidates, we really should pay attention to unexpected changes in the October games, either players brought in out of the cold or players suddenly not selected for the squad. There are some of these, so manager Nikola Jurcevic was busy starting to build his squad even in the first 2 weeks. And I've been beginning to put up the graphics as I talk here, so there we go. New manager as of October 3rd, and the manager going out, Alexander Ilic, and the manager coming in, Nikola Jurcevic, who we'll also introduce in a bit more detail later. Next, let's talk a little bit about the club affiliation of the players. So almost all of the players are with clubs in Lebanon, mostly from 3 clubs. And those 3 clubs are, in order of representation on the national team, Nejma, or Nejme, Al-Ahed, and Al-Ansar. But we do have a few players playing in other countries, and we will point out those players when we get to them. Okay, and lastly, in this part, in this comments on the squad, we have retired players. So Lebanon hasn't played in a major tournament, excuse me, until 2019 Asian Cup. So we look especially at players who have retired since that time. And we have right winger Ali Hammam. He had 55 caps and 3 goals for the national team and played from 2009 to 19. We have defensive midfielder Haytham Faour from 2011 to 2019. He had 59 caps. And then we have 3 central defenders, Mutaz Junaidi, 48 caps between 2008 and 2019. Cheto, Hassan Cheto, or nicknamed Moni, from 2011 to 2021, so a bit more recent in his retirement from the national team. 61 caps and 6 goals for a central defender. And then the last one is Noor Mansour, even more recent, 2010 to 22, with 62 caps and 2 goals. So losing a couple of veterans from that 2019 Asian Cup squad, but they have had time to replace these players. Next, we look at some recent games. So we are going to look at the participation of the candidates when we get to the players section here over the past 2 years. So we might as well kind of cover that in the recent games here. That begins in 2022 with World Cup 2022 qualifying. So the last of their games there, that is 4 games from January to March 2022. It was a few friendlies after that, but the next significant one is actually more than a year later, a friendly tournament in India, and that was from June 9th to June 18th. So actually playing fairly weak teams there. And then the same month, immediately after that finished, in fact, they were invited to the South Asian Football Federation Championship. That took place also in India, and it was from June 22nd to July 1st. So kind of 2 tournaments in a row there. The second, the local tournament in that locality. And finally, in September, just a short tournament in Thailand, the King's Cup. And that was from September 7th to 10th in 2023. And we saw that manager Alexander Ilic got fired for their performances in these last 3 cups. And I don't think it was that bad. They did tie India and Mongolia in that friendly tournament in the first part of June. And they did lose in the final of the SAF Championship to India on penalties, but otherwise they beat Maldives, Bhutan, and Bangladesh. These are all pretty weak teams. In the King's Cup in Thailand, they lost to the host Thailand, but they beat India. So finally, beating India after 4 meetings with them, that was a win, a draw, and 2 losses. Nevertheless, the FA in Lebanon was not satisfied and fired him over that, leaving the October games to the new manager, Jurcevic. Excuse me, I had to cough there. And those 2 games in October were against Montenegro and the United Arab Emirates. So stiffer competition, and new manager, sorry, I have to get this right, Jurcevic lost both of those games. So things not looking markedly better under him, although it did come pretty fast for him. Let's talk briefly about the formations that they've been playing. So in those World Cup games in 2022, they faced pretty stiff opposition there. Some of the best teams in the Asian region, South Korea, Iraq, and Iran. And they had a very defensive formation against them, a 5-3-2, so 5 at the back. But the other game they played there was against Syria, a team closer to their own level. And there they played their usual formation, which we see in most of their games since, and that is a 4-2-1-3. So there were a couple of games where they varied that to a 4-3-3 or something like that. But I think as we go through the candidates, it'll be helpful to think of Lebanon in a 4-2-3-1 formation. So that is with 2 kind of more defensive midfielders and 3 attacking midfielders. All right, now let's look at their upcoming games. They have World Cup qualifiers coming up, so that's a lot of pressure for the new manager. But fortunately, they are blessed with fairly easy teams in their November games. So on November 15th, they play Palestine. Given the political situation there, I'm not sure what will happen. That game might actually get postponed. But anyway, Lebanon versus Palestine on November 15th. And then in the November 20th game, they play Bangladesh. Bangladesh actually was weak enough to be in the preliminary round, and they did well to beat Maldives, who is usually slightly stronger than them. And we actually did a preview of those preliminary games. That was our first look at World Cup 2026 qualifying. Anyway, Lebanon faced Bangladesh. So we think they should be using their best players for this squad. Of course, very important games for Djurcevic to build his squad. However, it might be a blessing that against Bangladesh they can afford to be a bit more experimentative and try out some players that he's considering, because that should be a comfortable win, even though it is the away game. Palestine is slated as the home game there. All right, we move on to section 2, where we look at the Lebanese players, the candidates for making the squad, and we separate them into definite, likely, and possible. Generally, we don't list the possible but unlikely or seem to be off the squad, but we might mention them, and definitely we'll bring them back into the list if they appear on the final squad. We'll also try to identify starters and definite substitutes if we can. But let's begin with the managers, and as we saw, a bit of drama there with Alexander Ilic leaving or being dismissed in early October, and he had only been with the Lebanon team since 2022, and he was a professional player, but there's not much point in going into his biography. Let's focus instead on the new manager, Nikola Djurcevic, who was also a professional player, and actually he's Croatian and was on the Croatian national team from 1994 to 1996. Actually, that's when they became a national team, and he was part of their first tournament squad in the Euro 1996. So with Lebanon from October 2023. Prior to that, he had been with the Azerbaijan national team in 2019. He didn't bring them to any tournament though. And Dinamo Zagreb in Croatia, a club team, probably the biggest club in Croatia there, and several club teams prior to that. So a big job ahead for Nikola Djurcevic. He only had the October games. We're recording this at the end of October, and he only has the November games and whatever friendlies they organize before the tournament to pull his squad together. All right, let's move on to the goalkeepers, and we have a definite candidate in Mehdi Khalil, and two likely candidates, Mustafa Matar and Anton Aldouahi, and finally a possible candidate in Ali Sabeh. And there is a player who seems to be off the squad, Hadi Mortada, but we won't add him to the list again unless he makes the final squad. So let's go back to the beginning and talk about the players. Mehdi Khalil has been with the team since 2013 and has 52 caps. He is actually born in the Ivory Coast and was with teams mostly in Sierra Leone and in Sweden, so a bit of an interesting history there. He started playing in Lebanon for Al Safa in 2013 and somehow joined the national team in 2013. Usually, if it's a naturalized citizen, they play for a few years before they can join the national team. So I'm not exactly sure what happened there. Nevertheless, he was the starter in the Asian Cup 2019, Mehdi Khalil. But recently, more recently, he between that Asian Cup and now, he was off the team for 17 months, and he returned in November 2022 to start 7 of their games. Only 7 of their remaining 15 games, and he was on the bench for 7 others. However, the one match he wasn't selected for was the second last match under the new manager, so a bit worrying there. Nevertheless, we keep him as a definite candidate to reach the cup, but I'm not confident enough to say that he will definitely be the starter given the changes, and you'll see as we go through. Things are a bit up in the air right now. Mustafa Matar has been with the team since 2019, and he has 15 caps. He was a backup keeper, so on the roster for the 2019 Asian Cup, but didn't see any action. And he also was absent for 10 months, and he returned just recently in October 2023 and started one of their remaining 4 games and was on the bench for the other 2. So coming back into the fold recently and even starting a game. So obviously the manager is kind of trying out these goalkeepers. And that's why we can't really identify a clear starter. Antoine Al-Douahi, just 1 cap for him, and that was in 2023. He first appeared on the bench back in December 2021, but he started one of their games and was on the bench for 12 of them, for 12 games, not selected for 6 others. So Antoine Al-Douahi, we think he's likely as a backup keeper. I'm going to highlight him in blue because I think if he does come, he would definitely be a substitute and not the starter. But also in the fray is Ali Sabeh. So he has been with the team for a long time, since 2014, but has only earned 8 caps in that time. So he started 6 of the matches, including the second last match. Did I say that about... Oh yes, that was the match that Mehdi Khalil was not even called up for. So he started that match. He subbed in for 1 and was on the bench for 7 matches. However, apart from that start in the second last match, he wasn't selected for the other 3 matches in September and October. So that's why we have him maybe kind of lowest on the totem pole here. Because he wasn't selected for 3 of the last 4 games. But really, he's pretty close in likelihood to the other ones. Again, if he made it, he looks like he would be a substitute. But things kind of up in the air for the goalie. So Mehdi Khalil seems to be the starter, but a bit of a concern because he missed the second last game. And then things are very up in the air over the backups, although we think 2 of these will make it rather than someone else being brought in. Mustafa Matar, Antoine Al-Douahi, and Ali Sabeh. 2 of those 3 probably making it to the cup. Okay, let's move on to defenders, and we'll begin with central defenders. And this is where we had the 3 retired or 3 of the retired players. So those 5 retired players we talked about at the beginning, 3 of them were central defenders. Hassan Moni Cheto was just a substitute in the 2019 Asian Cup. Noor Massan, also a substitute in that last Asian Cup. And Mutaz Junaidi, a starter in that cup. So they've had time to adapt, and those guys weren't starters anyway. So perhaps not as big an adjustment as it seems. Anyway, we have a definite candidate here in Walid Shur, and a likely candidate in Qasim El Zain, and then a possible candidate in Maxim Aoun. And I'm going to put the possible but unlikely candidate because there is a good chance of him coming because we have so few central defenders here, which we'll talk about in a minute. But Khalil Khamis, because there's not a lot to choose from here, we'll add to the list. And then there's a couple of players who are off the team, but they haven't been off the team for that long. We won't add them to the list. One is Alexander Michel Melki. He was a regular until 2022 and also a starter in the 2019 Asian Cup. But from the beginning of 2022, he kind of dropped off quickly, and now he hasn't been selected for the last 13 games. So he seems to be off the squad, the Swedish-born Melki, and we'll look at his brother Felix soon. Also, Mohamed Al Suhaimi, he joined the team in 2022, had a couple of caps, and then kind of disappeared. But he is only 21 years old, so there's a chance he can come back. But we have to say that over the last year, they've been off the team, so we won't add them to the list unless they do come back. Okay, let's go back to the beginning. Just take a look at these players. Walid Shur has been with the team since 2021, but he's kind of carved out a starting position for himself. 16 caps. He started 12 of their 19 games from over the past 2 years. Not selected for 4 of those, but all 4 of those were near the beginning of that period. So he looks a likely candidate. He was actually with Luton in England in his youth. Qasim El Zain, since 2014, he's been with Lebanon, 33 caps and 1 goal, and he was part of the 2019 Asian Cup. He was a substitute, but he did manage to give up a penalty to Saudi Arabia. He was pretty hard done by, though. He hardly even touched the ball. He started 5, including the last 3 of their 19 games over the past couple of years, was subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 2 and not selected for 10. But we have him as a likely candidate because recently he's been partnering Walid Shur, and those two kind of look like the starting central defenders. I'm gonna nominate Shur as a starter. Qasim El Zain, though, I'm not confident enough to do that, but he likely will be a starter. Next, Maxim Aoun has been with the team just since 2023. He got his first appearance on the bench in March 2023, but did start 3 of their remaining 11 games. He was with the under-23 team for a couple of those games, so still playing for them, but on the bench for 6 others. So it's actually just 2 matches that he missed in that period since his first cap. However, those last 2 matches were the ones in October, so a bit of confusion there. He looked likely for a while, but in September he was with the under-23 team, on October not selected. So we only have him as a possible candidate there. Khalil Khamis, our possible but unlikely candidate, is also an interesting case. He's been with the team all the way since 2014, but wasn't part of the Asian Cup in 2019. He only has 3 caps for the national team, actually. And he also only started 1 of their 19 games over the last 2 years and wasn't selected for 17 of them. And appeared to be off the team, actually, until suddenly he came back in October. And appeared on the bench in October. So maybe a consideration under the new manager. And, it looks like they need central defenders. I should say, though, that there are a couple of defensive midfielders who will meet soon, who do come in sometimes to play central defense. So those players may double as central defenders. Usually a team brings 5 or 6. For the time being, it does seem to have settled down to Walid Shur and Al Zine, and definitely we think Shur will be a starter. Probably Al Zine, but I'm not confident enough to say so. Yes, okay, let's move on to left back position. And this is really kind of up in the air for the left back. We have a likely candidate in Mohamed Al Hayak and two possible candidates. One is Mahir Sabra and the other is Abdul Razak Bakramanji. And then we have a possible but unlikely candidate in Mohamed Zine Tahan, but I'm not going to put him on the list because he last appeared in March of 2022, although he was a substitute in the last Asian Cup. So none of these other 3 that we have on the list took part in that Asian Cup. Mohamed Al Hayak has only been with Lebanon since 2022. And he has 6 caps. He got his first cap in December of last year, December 2022. But then he started 7, including the last 2 of the remaining 11 games. And he was subbed in for 1 of those and not selected for 5 of them. But and so we can't put him as a definite candidate. He does look the most likely in this position, though. Next, we have Mahir Sabra. He's been with the team since 2000. Sorry about that. He's been with the team since 2016, 18 caps and 1 goal, but not selected for the Asian Cup in 2019. Over the last couple of years, he started 6 of their 19 games and was on the bench for 1, but not selected for 12 matches. So just a possible candidate here. And finally, Abdul Razak Dakrami got his first appearance on the bench in June 2023. So a young player. He started 2 of their remaining 10 games there and also subbed in for 1. He was on the bench for 4. However, like the player we talked about, the central defender, he was with the under-23 team for the 2 games in September and then not selected for the 2 in October. So we're not really sure what that means. He was looking like he was making his way into the squad for a while and then absent for the last 2. Mahir Sabra was a regular at the beginning of that the last 2-year period. Then he was off the squad and came back and started a game in September. So it's really an unsettled position. Al Hayak is often stationed in the left back position, but not always. So sometimes we've seen out of position players come and start in this position, like Suni Saad has been there, and one of the attacking midfielders has come back to play it. So I think in November he'll really be trying to nail down this position because it's really up in the air. On the right back side, though, it's a bit better. So we'll move over there. We have Hussein Zain as a definite candidate, and then we have three possible candidates: Saeed Awada, Abdallah Mukrabi. We're not really sure if he's a right back actually, and then Nassar. I'm sorry, there. And we also have a player who seems to be off the squad, Abbas Asi, but he last played in March 2022, so we're not adding him to the list. Even though we're certain that Hussein Zain, the definite candidate, will definitely be called up to the Asian Cup. We're not so sure he'll be a starter because he only starts about half of their games. So, or I should say recently, he did start 14 of their 19 games over the past couple of years, was subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 2, and not selected for 1 other. But those games that he didn't start in have been kind of on and off recently. So we're not confident enough to say that he's going to be a starter, but we are confident that he'll be called up. Saeed Awada got his first cap in December 2022 and started 2 of their remaining 14 games and was on the bench for 2, but not selected for 10. That makes him look like a youngster getting his start less than a year ago, but in fact he's 31 years old, so got his first cap in his 30s. But nevertheless is a possible candidate here. He was actually called back for the games in October, and he started the first of those October games and was on the bench for the other. So again, we're not really sure what the manager's plans are with this position, calling him back. The next possible candidate was Abdallah Mukrabi. He is actually just coded as a defender, but the only time he's ever started a game, he started in the right back position. And as we can see, it is a position where they need backup. So maybe he's a right back, but we don't know because his first appearance was in October 2023, and he started 1 of those games and was on the bench for the other. Actually, no, he was involved in the September and October games. Anyway, and he's been involved in all 4, subbed into 1, on the bench for 2, and starting 1. So we do think he's a possible candidate, but we're not certain that he actually is a right back. Okay, finally, Nasser. We thought he was off the team. He returned after a 2.5-year absence and appeared on the bench in October 2023. So another player who's been called back in under the new manager. So I said this position was a bit more definite, but having gone through it, I realized I was maybe wrong. I just saw that we had a definite candidate, so I thought it was a bit better defined. Okay, so both left back and right back starting positions seem to be up for grabs. It'll be interesting to look at the November games to see who is selected for those games. Okay, let's move on to the midfielders. We do kind of have a template here for general or versatile midfielders. We do sometimes find midfielders who rove all over the field and can't be pinned down to one position, but none of those here. So we're going to look at defensive midfielders first. And in truth, there's not much distinction on the squad between a defensive and a central midfielder. If you think of the 4-2-3-1 formation, we'll be talking about mostly that defensive line, the 2, and it could be a defensive midfielder or a central midfielder. So let's look at the candidates. Nevertheless, we'll kind of follow their designated position, and we begin with a likely candidate, Jihad Ayub, and we also have a likely candidate in Hassan Sroor. And we have 2 possible candidates, 3 possible candidates in Muhammad Ali Dani and in Yahya El Hindi, and finally in the player we said we would look at, Felix Michel or Felix Michel Melki. It seems like they go by both last names depending on the situation. Felix Michel Melki, he and the brother we met earlier, both born in Sweden, but both playing for Lebanon. Okay, let's go back and take a look at each one. So Jihad Ayub actually played as a central defender in one of the September games, and he got his first appearance back in December 2021 and started 9 including the last 4 of their 19 games over the past 2 years, was on the bench for 2 and not selected for 8 of those matches. So that's why we can't put him as a definite, but as a likely candidate. He was born Jihad Ayoub in Venezuela and is one of the few players here playing outside of the country. He's with a club in Indonesia. So Jihad Ayoub, a likely candidate here. Okay, next we have Hassan Srour, and he's been with the team just since 2022. No, wait, he got his first appearance on the bench in September 2021 and then was off the team and returned after a 15-month absence in December 2022. That's when he got his first cap. He started 5 of their remaining 12 games and he was subbed in for 3 and on the bench for 4. So actually looking quite likely is Hassan Srour. And however, he was not selected and on the bench for those last 2 October games. So looking a little less likely under the new manager, but we really have to wait and see. We still put him as a likely candidate here. Next, we go to the possible candidates, beginning with Mohamed Ali Dani. So he's actually coded as a central defender on a couple of sites, a couple of sources that I have, and he started 11 of their 19 games over the past couple of years, subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 3. However, he was not selected for the last 4 matches, so he looked like a regular candidate until recently, but hasn't played in September and October. He, by the way, plays for Trelleborgs in Sweden. He also was born in Sweden, just like the Felix Michel Melki, who we'll meet shortly. And again, a bit unclear because he was a regular candidate until recently. Yahya Al-Hindi is kind of the opposite situation. He has only 2 caps for the national team, and they were both earned in the summer of 2019. Then he was off the team, but he returned after a 4-year absence in October of 2023. On the bench, didn't get on the field, but on the bench for both of those. So when a player returns like that, at the last minute, we have to consider him a possible candidate. But over the course of things, he seems a bit less likely, say, than Mohamed Ali Dani. We'll have to see. Finally, we have Felix Michel Melki. So he does play in Lebanon, but he did play for a few clubs in Sweden, including a fairly big club, AIK, from 2019 to 22, and he was a starter in the 2019 Asian Cup. However, he has kind of drifted off the team. He started 4 of their 19 games over the past 2 years, subbed in for 2 and was on the bench for 5, and not selected for 7, including the last 4 matches. So kind of like Mohamed Ali Dani, seemed fairly irregular in the squad. But not recently. He also has lined up as a central defender when he has started recently, but we're going to keep him as a defensive midfielder here, as he was in the 2022 World Cup qualifiers there. So he was a regular until 2022. Then he kind of dropped to the bench more and more, and as we saw, not selected for the last 4 games. So a little difficult to tell what's going on. We also have a player, one of the retired players, Haytham Fowler, seemingly off the squad. We'll mention his name, but not put him on the list here. Haytham Fowler was a starter in the 2019 Asian Cup, and you know, he's 33 years old, so it's possible he'll come in out of the cold. But we'll put him on the list if he does come back to the team. Okay, moving on to central midfielders, we have Ali Tanish. Ali Tanish is one of the few players that we can say is a definite, not only candidate, but a definite starter. And we also have possible candidate Hassan Kourani. And actually, he's probably more of a likely candidate. But let's take a look at these two players in a bit more detail. So Ali Tanish got his first cap in December 2022, but has started 11 of the remaining 14 games, including the last 4, and then he was subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 1. Only 1 match that he wasn't selected for. So Ali Tanish, one of the mainstays on the team recently. Hassan Kourani, the possible candidate, got his first cap in November 2022 and started 2 of their remaining 15 games. But he was subbed in for 6 and on the bench for 5. So that's why I say he's kind of a likely player. The only 2 games he wasn't selected for were at the beginning of the period, the 2-year period that we're looking at. And however, he has only started 2 games, so we consider him I'm going to move him up to likely, because this list we're creating is a likelihood of making the squad. But he will definitely be a substitute if he makes the squad. All right, so that's the central midfield. So in summary, Tanish seems a regular now, but his partner has been shifting a little bit. It could be Jihad Ayoub, or it could be Hassan Srour. And the other 2 possible players we mentioned, Kourani and Dani, replace sometimes, but seem to be backup players there. Meanwhile, when Felix Michel Melki has played, he's played as a central defender. Let's move on to left and right midfielders. And actually, if you think about the formation, the 4-2-3-1, there really aren't any in more of a defensive sense. So the 3 that the players that we'll talk about from now will tend to be more offensive midfielders, left attacking midfielders, or right attacking midfielders, or possibly wingers. But in the 4-2-3-1 formation, attacking midfielders on the left and right. So this has increasingly become, when we get to attacking midfielders and forwards, it's increasingly become the same stable of 5 or 6 players. So we will meet them later. But one player coded as a left midfielder, indeed the only one, is a likely candidate. And he didn't start as an attacking midfielder. Rather, when he has started, he has been a left back. In fact, 2 of his 3 starts were as left back, and the other one was as a right back. So we may find ourselves recoding his position. Right now, though, he's coded as a left midfielder. And as we said, he started 3 of their 19 games over the last 2 years. But he was subbed in for 9 and on the bench for 3. So we consider him a likely candidate. However, he did missed the last 2 matches in October, not selected for those. So that's all we have actually for left midfielders. And for right midfielders, we have none. So we basically move on to the offensive line, beginning with left midfielders. And we have one likely candidate here in Saad, Sunni Saad. I think actually he's almost certain to be on the squad, but when we look, we'll see why we put him as likely. And then 3 possible candidates: Khalil Badr, Ali Markabawi, who's been playing as a forward, and Mohamed Sadek, or Mohamed Omar Sadek. Let's go back and look at these players. So Sunni Saad is a relative veteran on the team since 2013. He has 32 caps and 7 goals. However, he was not part of the Asian Cup squad. He was kind of off the team for a period around there. He was born in the United States, Sunni Saad, and actually played for USA underage teams, under 20 and under 23. And he has played in the USA. He's kind of played all over the place, everywhere except Lebanon. So he played in South Korea, in Jordan. Oh, actually, he did play in Lebanon with Al Ansar for a short time. Right now, he's playing in Malaysia. So Sunni Saad started 10 of their 19 games over the last 2 years and was on the bench for 2, but there were 7 games that he was not selected for. Okay, the 3 possible candidates begin with Khalil Badr. So he got his first cap in November 2022 and started 5 of their remaining 16 games, but subbed in for 6 and was on the bench for 2. And there was only 3 matches that he was not selected for. However, those were 3 of the last 4 matches. So he seemed a likely, even a definite candidate up until the last 4 games, and then missed 3 of them. So leaves us in a bit of confusion as to where he is, or his status with the team under the new manager. Next, we have Ali Markabawi, and he got his first cap in June of 2023. That was in the SAF Cup, the South Asian Football Federation tournament that we talked about. He started 3 of the games there, and those are the only games he started over the last 13 matches, but he has subbed in for 3 and been on the bench for 3. However, he was not selected for the last 4 matches, so again, a bit of confusion under the new manager. And interestingly, he played as a centre forward in all 3 of his starts in the SAF Cup, even though he's coded as a left winger. And we're not going to make too much of that because some of the forwards weren't brought to that cup, so maybe he was just standing in. Finally, we have Mohamed Sadek, and he got his first cap in March of 2022 and started 3 games, 3 of the remaining 11 games. He was subbed in for 2, but then not selected for 8 others, including the last 4 matches. I'm tempted actually to put him down to possible, but unlikely. But we'll leave him at the kind of lower level of the possible end. Okay, so that is left wingers who usually play as left attacking midfielders or other positions, which we saw. Sunni Saad started as a left back in one game also, so they do move around. Let's move on to I put the names in the wrong place. So Sunni Saad is a left winger, and the 3 possible candidates also left wingers. We move on then to right wingers, and we have 2 possible candidates here. One is Mohamed Haidar, and the other is Zain Farhan. And we do have a couple of players who seem to be off the squad, so I'll just mention their names because they were both involved in the Asian Cup. Actually, Ali Hammam was a starter in the 2019 Asian Cup, and Rabi Atea was a substitute in that tournament. But we won't add them to the list unless they show up again. Oh, okay, I put the wrong graphic there. So Mohamed Haidar was part of the Asian Cup in 2019. He was a sub actually for game 1, but then gained a starting position. And he's a real veteran with the team since 2011, with 83 caps and 4 goals. And he started 3 of their 19 games over the last 2 years, subbed in for 2 of those, but he wasn't used for 14 others. Actually, the source I use didn't give the specifics for him. But basically, we think he hasn't been called up, but he might have been on the bench. He wasn't subbed in or starting any games recently. So, yeah, we'll have to see. Participation kind of suggests he's a possible candidate here. That's Mohamed Haidar. And part of the reason he may be a bit stronger than a possible candidate is that Zain Farhan is out with a knee injury until March. So he's been out since September 2023, and he won't be fit for the Cup. This is Zane Ferran, got his first appearance on the bench in December 2021 and started 5 of their 19 games and was subbed in for 5 and on the bench for 1. But then he got injured and, of course, not selected after that. So hard to say whether he would have been on the squad, but we can definitely say that he's injured, and in fact we'll move him to the injured category. Okay, and that is it for the wingers, and we move on to the forward line, and we begin with attacking midfielders. So again, the 4-2-3-1. The 3 players in the offensive midfield line are mostly coded as attacking midfielders, and as I said, it's increasingly become the same group of 5 or 6 players. But we do have a couple of other players to mention here who kind of play a bit role. So let's begin with Hassan Matuk, probably their most important player. And we're putting him in as an attacking midfielder, although he is coded as a left midfielder and sometimes as a forward. It doesn't matter. He's part of that 3-man line supporting the attacker. Hassan Matuk is the captain of the team. He's been with the team since 2006, and he has 93 caps and 21 goals. So he's 35 years old, so kind of getting up there in age. And of course, he was a starter in the 2019 Asian Cup and started 11 of their 19 games over the past 2 years, subbing in for 2 and on the bench for 1. Not selected for 3 matches, but he has been selected recently. So definitely Hassan Matuk we'll see at the Cup, and almost certainly as a starter as well. We also have a definite candidate, and I forgot to kind of go through the candidates first, so I'll do that here. We have a definite candidate in Nader Matar. And then we have 2 likely candidates, Basel Juradi and Ali Al-Haj, and 1 possible candidate in Daniel Lajoud. And I think in this case, I'm going to mention, I'm going to put on the list 2 of the possible but unlikely candidates, because I think there is a decent chance of them coming into the squad, so it'll be good to have them on our list. Okay, so we have covered Hassan Matuk, again coded as a left midfielder, usually a central attacking midfielder, but sometimes a left attacking midfielder, or even in the odd case a left winger. Nader Matar is also a left attacking midfielder. He started 12 of their 19 games over the past 2 years and subbed in for 2, and he was on the bench for 5 others. So he has always been called up. Nader Matar was born in the Ivory Coast. His parents were Lebanese and Moroccan. So a pretty international figure there. And he was a substitute in the 2019 Asian Cup. So Nader Matar has been with the team since 2012, and he has 64 caps. I think it's 66 now because I didn't update it. And only 4 goals, so that's a bit of a surprise. Okay, let's move on to the likely candidate. So Basel Juradi. And Basel Juradi was also a starter in the Asian Cup in 2019, but just in game 1, and then he was on the bench for the remaining games because of an injury. So over the last 2 years, he started 3 of their 19 games, including recent games, and subbed in for 1. And injured for the first 2 of those and not selected for 13 others. So you may wonder why we have him as a likely candidate. But recently he has gone from not being selected to being a starter in 3 of their last 4 games. And there we go. So he plays for out of the country, one of the few players not playing in Lebanon. He's with Bangkok United in Thailand, and he's played in all over the place in Cyprus, Croatia, and Norway. Some of the teams he's played for. He was actually born in Denmark, and those were the first teams he played for. So Bas Al-Juradi, tentatively we put him as a likely candidate because of his recent participation. Next is Ali Al-Haj, and Ali Al-Haj got his first cap in December 2022 and started 3 of their remaining 15 games, but he was subbed in for 6 and on the bench for 6 others. So that is pretty much a definite candidate. We're just a bit tentative because we think there may be changes under the new manager. So Ali Al-Haj we'll put as a likely candidate, and definitely though not a starter but a substitute. Next we have Daniel Lajoud. So Daniel Lajoud plays in Mexico. I think he was born in Mexico, but I'm not dead sure about that. But he plays for Atlante in Mexico, which is actually a fairly small club, but he was with Monterrey in Mexico, a big club from 2018 to 22, but I don't think he got on the pitch that much with them. As far as his Lebanon history goes, he's been on the team since 2022, and he has 4 caps. So he is coded actually as a left winger sometimes, and he came back into the squad briefly in September for a bench appearance and an appearance, I think, for 5 minutes as a substitute, but he wasn't selected in October. So we can only put him as a possible candidate here. And yeah, just a quick mention of the possible but unlikely candidates. So Majed Osman returned after a 2-year absence, didn't start any of the remaining 4 games. So he returned in September of 2023, but he was subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 1, then not selected for the October matches. So we consider him possible but unlikely. The other one is Ali Chetu. And he got his first appearance on the bench in June 2023 and didn't start any games, but was subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 3. But like Majid Osman, kind of on the team and then off the team. So he just played in those June games in those 2 tournaments in India, but hasn't been selected in the September or October games. So we'll keep them on the list because there's a chance they may come in. And then we have one candidate who seems to be off the squad. That is Canadian-born Gabriel Bitar. And if you're wondering if I'm just mentioning his name because he's Canadian and we're a Canadian media cast, I'd have to confess that's mostly true. He even played for FC Edmonton, where we're broadcasting from in Canada. But no, really, we just want to mention his name, Gabriel Bitar, because there is a small chance of these players coming in under the new manager. But he does seem to be off the squad, so we won't put him on the list. Let's move to the forward line. We don't have any players coded as secondary strikers. Actually, I think one source does code Ali Chetu as a secondary striker, but we have him as a attacking midfielder here. So the forwards are the likely candidate Karim Darwish, and some people may be surprised that Hilal Al-Helwi is only a possible candidate here. We'll talk about why. And we have one possible but unlikely, but again, we're going to add him to the list because there is a chance we'll see his name. Let's go back to the beginning with Karim Darwish, the likely candidate. So he actually was absent from the team for 12 months, but he returned in March 2022 and started 9 of their remaining 17 games and was subbed in for 7 and on the bench for 1 other. So he started their last 2 games as well. So I'm wondering why I didn't put him as a definite candidate, but it just might be that we're a bit uncertain under the new manager. But anyway, likely to definite candidate in Karim Darwish. Next is Hilal Al-Helwi. He's a very familiar name, one of the most familiar names on the Lebanon squad here. He was a starter in the Asian Cup 2019 and scored 2 of their 4 goals in that tournament. So I'm surprised that he's not been playing for the team as much as one would expect. He was off the team for 18 months, but he returned just recently in September 2023, but didn't start any of the games. He was subbed in for 2 and on the bench for the 2 others. So we'll have to see. He was actually born in Germany, was Hilal Al-Helwi, and played for German clubs until moving to Lebanese clubs in 2021. But he kind of has played in various countries. So a bit of a surprise there. Possible candidate on our list here, but in my mind, I would consider him very likely to make the squad. Okay, and then we have Mohamed Jalal Kadou as the possible but unlikely candidate. And Kadou started 5 of their 19 games over the past 2 years, subbed in for 2, but then wasn't selected for the last 12 matches. And I don't know what gives me the feeling that there's a better chance than we give him here. He's possible but unlikely. He was last called up in March 2023. Okay, and then we just have 2 names to mention, but players who seem to be off the squad. That is Fadel Antar and Hassan Mahana. We'll just throw those names out there in case they come back into the fray. Okay, so some closing thoughts. Lebanon very much up in the air. We saw a lot of players kind of not selected in October who had regularly been selected before. We saw a lot of players selected in October that had been off the squad before. So all the work that Alexander Ilic did needs to be reviewed by new manager Jurcevic, and it's looking like a pretty tough task. Anyway, we will update the podcast when the final rosters come out, and so that's part of what we'll do in part 2 in December. We'll go over the list again and say which ones made the squad and which ones didn't, and we'll cover any notable non-selections there, players we thought were going to make it but didn't, any surprise inclusions, players coming in out of the cold, and then any new players, and there are always a few. And finally, we'll give an update on injury. We already saw 1 player who's going to be out for the Cup, but we need to get closer to the Cup to really do this section. Okay, well, that is it. Let me go back to the opening graphic here. That is it for part 1 of Lebanon, and we will see you in December for part 2. We originally planned to tag on our past, present, and future plans for the mediacast, but we have instead decided to put a link to that 10-minute video in the show notes. It covers what we're working on and what we plan to do over the next 9 months. We'd like to thank Naber Avichan and Pixabay for the wonderful music you hear in this mediacast. The title is called Arabic Trap.